It was a Friday night and my friend Philip was sleeping over. We lived in the same neighborhood and had been friends for years, so we would frequently hang out. Phil and I were in the 5th grade, but we weren't really troublemakers, so we usually just stayed in and played games on my computer. On this particular night, my dad was visiting my uncle who had just gotten out of the hospital after having an operation, and my mom was working an event with her catering business. Therefore, we had the house completely to ourselves. After finishing the Domino's pizza my mom had ordered for us, Phil and I went upstairs and got on my computer. I remember we started to play one of the old Half-Life games, but then stopped because Phil wanted to show me this funny video. Eventually we just started watching random videos, including meme compilations, including the ones that said "you laugh, you lose." Occasionally we look at the comments, which were filled with generic replies with a bunch of emojis. But then we noticed this one comment from an account named PunmasterSTP with an unusual profile picture. It was just the word pun in black letters on a plain white background. I think this was a SpongeBob meme video, and the comment said something like, "Oh man, the humor is bikini bottoming out," followed by a laughing face emoji. It was lame to say the least, but Phil and I didn't really give it a second thought. A few minutes later we were on random music videos. We were watching this one by a guy named Lars Frost Nielsen when Phil said, "Dude." A second later I realized what had caught his attention. It was another comment from that Punmaster account. This was rather strange, since we were now on a completely different set of videos. Unlike the last one, this comment actually seemed legitimate, and was something like, very intense, and I think a lot of us have probably thought we're stuck between heaven and hell sometimes. It's also great to see you back uploading. Phil and I started joking about how this account was everywhere, and Phil suggested we search for something random again, and if we saw another comment by the same person, then my computer was haunted. I laughed and typed in Tunnel B1 playthrough. For those who don't know, Tunnel B1 is this old PS1 game where you drive a hovercraft through tunnels, and incidentally it was the game Phil's parents got him for his birthday one year, along with his PlayStation. We played it a few times, because that's the only game he had at first, but it would quickly get frustrating and we never made it past the first several levels. It even became a kind of running joke between us. After the search results came up, I scrolled down and picked a random video. It came out several years ago and had less than 1,000 views. As I clicked the link and the video loaded, Phil started laughing at how the Punmaster would be there. But then we almost fell over when we saw a comment. This time it was extremely detailed and included 2 separate timestamps. The Punmaster went on to recount his own experience with the game, which included playing it with one of his friends soon after it came out. A few other people had left comments, and the Punmaster had replied to them as well. Phil and I looked at each other, and the thought crossed my mind that he was somehow behind this. Was Phil the Punmaster? But that didn't make any sense. How would he know I'd search for Tunnel B1 and then click on this one random video? Phil got excited and took the mouse and clicked to visit Punmaster's channel. Even though we had no idea what to expect, we were still confused. The channel seemed to consist mostly of scary story videos, but there were other ones about programming, I guess. There were even more random videos, like the person walking around after a snowstorm or apparently hacking some Facebook-type game. And a lot of the thumbnails were weird. We ended up clicking on a video about fruit flies saving the day, and we're surprised the quality wasn't super terrible. That's when Phil nudged me and said, "You want to subscribe?" The account had exactly 999 subscribers. For some reason I didn't want to, I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it's just because this whole group of videos was so strange. Anyway, I didn't have much of a choice, because a moment later Phil clicked the subscribe button. And here is where the night changed from creepy to terrifying. Phil was laughing as I tried to laugh along, when all of a sudden we heard a knock at the front door. It took us both by surprise, and we jumped a little in our chairs. I checked the time, and it was only like 9, meaning my mom shouldn't have been home for another 2 hours. It was also pretty uncommon to get salesmen in our neighborhood, and as we weren't expecting anyone, we had zero idea who that could be. Phil turned to me and said, "Dude, are you gonna answer that?" I shushed him and shook my head. For some reason, I felt sure that the person would immediately go away if we didn't answer, as long as we stayed quiet. So Phil and I continued to sit at my computer upstairs, listening for another knock. Phil started moving the mouse around randomly and clicked on the YouTube notification bell. That's when we saw it, a reply from the Punmaster. Phil clicked on the notification, and this was the exact message. "Hey, thank you guys so much. You're my 1,000th subscriber. I'd really like to thank you in person." Phil started laughing at how the pun master was outside my door, and even though I knew that made no logical sense, for some reason my blood started running cold. The first part of the message also made me feel uneasy. It was you guys and not you, almost as if the pun master knew there were multiple people using the computer. Before I could really react, Phil actually started replying to the comment. He wrote something like, "You're welcome, lol, are you outside the door right now?" Literally 2 seconds after Phil replied, we received another notification. This one simply said, "Yes." The knock at the door freaked us both out, and I had had enough of this conversation. I told Phil to stop touching the mouse and keyboard, but still thinking this was funny, he typed out another message before I could stop him. "LOL, what address are you at?" 2 seconds later, another notification arrived, and to my horror, it contained my exact address. Now Phil and I were both terrified, and I started to question if this was some kind of nightmare. Another knock came from the door downstairs, this time followed by the word, "Hello?" I instinctively went over and got my baseball bat from my closet, which genuinely surprised Phil. Honestly, it probably would have surprised me to know I'd do that, but my body must have been in fight or flight mode, and I somehow chose fight. "Dude, what are you doing?" Phil asked me as I walked to the top of the stairs. "Who the F are you?" I yelled. "I just want to thank you for being my 1000th subscriber." The voice sounded like a man in his 30s or 40s, and I had no idea who it could be. I looked back at Phil, who had a very worried expression on his face and was clutching onto the handles of the chair. Somehow I came up with the courage to walk all the way down the stairs and right up to the peephole. There I saw the man standing directly in front of the door, looking right at the hole. The man seemed to sense my presence, because the moment I walked up, the man said, "Thank you for all of your support. It's been an incredible adventure, and you've really helped me have so much fun." Then he turned around and started walking back down our front walkway, never to be seen or heard from again. Needless to say, I still have zero explanation for what happened, and to this day Phil swears up and down that he had absolutely nothing to do with this. By now, I probably would have been convinced that the whole thing was a dream, were it not for the fact that Phil was with me and he remembers it too. We even looked stuff up, and our only other explanation is something called a folie à deux, which is like a shared hallucination. Still, I have no idea why Phil and I would have hallucinated something like that, seeing as how neither of us ever drank or did drugs. Maybe it was something we ate, or some kind of weird substance in the house, I don't know. Nothing remotely like this has ever happened again, and we still live in that same house. Ultimately, all I can say is, thanks for all the support, you guys rock!